This video is going to go over some of the basics of making a good chart and graph in Excel, including some of the things that you have to take into consideration with your data before you even get started. So the most important thing is to know your data. Take a look at a data set that you're going to work with and go through it and understand it and decide what story do you want to tell. This data set we're looking at here, as you can see, is selected measures of household income dispersion. So if we look through here and decide what data do I want to show here, what's the story? So let's scroll down a little bit and look at this section here of the mean household income quintiles. So it's a measure of income dispersion. And let's say we want to compare a few years. Let's say 2015, and then let's compare that to 1977. So first thing we want to do is move our data around a little bit to get it into a good shape for Excel to handle. There's other ways of doing it, but I feel it's so much easier to just copy and paste your data into a new sheet, get it how you want it before you start trying to make a chart or a graph, and it will really make your life a lot easier. So I'm going to select the data for 2015. I'm going to scroll over for 1977. I'm going to hold down the control key and then select that column as well. I'm simply going to copy that. I'm going to go to a new sheet and then paste it. And so now I have a much simpler sheet to read with just the data that I want to graph. So this is showing the income dispersion, the share based on the quintiles. So to get started, let's just select the data, select all of it, including our labels, and go up to Insert and Charts. And let's just see what kind of charts Excel will generate for us. So first, let's just look at a quick little bar chart. And when we look at that, we say, that doesn't look quite right. That's not really what we want. We look at the different types of charts, stacked bar chart, and none of these are really what we want. So you can see that Excel's not quite recognizing the data the way we want them to. So let's try a few things. Let's get rid of our title over here. Sometimes just something as simple as that will change the way Excel sees the data. So now when we go to a column chart, you can see how the data looks. And let's go ahead and really quickly select that. So now we have a simple column chart comparing the data. So now we can see the comparison of 2015 to 1977, the shares of the income. And you can see a trend here. Every group had a larger share in 1977 except the highest quintile. Anytime you're making a chart or a graph or any kind of visualization, you should be striving to make it as readable and self-explanatory and clear as possible. So when we're looking at this chart, one of the things that you might notice is the order of the date. 2015 comes before 1977, which is not logically the way we would normally want to lay things out. We would want to have the older dates first. So you should keep that in mind, and we should swap these. So how would we do that? There's at least two different ways. One would be we can simply change the order of these columns of how the data is organized. You can do that. It's a bit of a hassle. We already have the data how we want it, so how else can we do it? Let's try this. Right-click in your chart area and go to Select Data. When you're in the Select Data screen, there's a couple of things you can do. You could switch the row and column to get a completely different type of chart. We don't want to do that. We like what we see here. But all we're going to do here is change the order over here. So this is under Legend Entries. There's an up arrow and a down arrow. I'm going to hit Move Down. And that changes the order, so 1977 is above 2015. So even though it says Legend Entries, it's doing more than that. So let's click OK. So now you can see it changed the order of the legend. 1977 comes first, as it should chronologically, but it also actually changed the way the data is displayed so that the series for 1977 appears first. And it makes much more clear to the reader what you're trying to show, and that is that the shares of income have declined for the bottom four quintiles and increased for the highest quintile. Now let's think about another way that you might want to show this exact same data and create a bit of a different representation visually. So there's a couple of different options, but one is, let's say we just wanted to show the data and how it breaks down just based off of 1 year, say 2015. We would start by selecting the data, and let's consider our option. In this case, a pie chart might be a valid option because each of our quintiles is a part of a whole, so they all add up to 100%. You can only use a pie chart for data that adds up to 100%. So let's go ahead and select our pie chart and see the chart that Excel creates for us. One of the reasons that this pie chart would work for us is that we only have 5 different categories because they're quintiles. So when you only have a limited number of categories, it's easier to tell the different sections, the different wedges of the pie apart. If you had something that had a larger number of categories, pie chart would not be as appropriate because it's harder to tell the difference between the sizes of the wedges. In this case, there's such a wide difference in variety of the sizes, it's easy to tell one from the other. So a pie chart's another way that we could show this data, but it really only works for 1 year at a time. It wouldn't really make sense to put 2 pie charts next to each other because they're harder to compare. If you wanted to do something that compared the 2 years together like that had the breakdown, you might want to try a stacked bar chart, which we will talk about in a few minutes. Another thing we might want to think about, though, is maybe we should manipulate the data a little bit to show yet another story. Let's say we just wanted to show the change, the difference between 2015 and 1977. So let's calculate that with a simple formula. Just type equals the value for 2015 minus the value for 1977. Hit enter. And then we could just use the fill handle to copy that formula down. So now we've calculated the difference between the 2 years. So now we can use that to make a chart. So how would we want to present that? Well, there's a couple of different options. But let's select those 2 columns. So first I'm going to select our categories, and then I'm going to hold down the Control key and select the column with our differences. And now I'm going to go back to Insert Charts, and let's see what a simple column chart looks like. And so now in this view you see the difference. And this is a good visualization because you can see the first 4 quintiles are below 0 because they showed negative growth, and the highest was significantly positive. So this is a visualization that really shows the differences in the change between the 2 years. So in this case, we would want to tweak this chart. It's a good start, but you don't want your labels, your axis to show over the bars like that. So I'm going to select my horizontal axis, and then I see my options pane for the format axis. If I don't see my format axis pane, I can right click on my axis and choose format axis. And then I'm going to make sure I'm under axis options and then click the farthest icon for axis options. And then I'm going to look under labels, and one of the options there is label position, and I'm going to choose low. And that moves my labels down below the chart. So now my chart looks much more readable. Another very common way of showing comparisons in data like this is using a stacked bar chart. So again, we're having people compare area, so you have to take into consideration, again, that people are not very good at comparing area, but a stacked bar chart is useful when the parts of the whole add up to 100% or the total. So let's go ahead and select our data again. Go to Insert, and let's pick over here. You can see if we just hover over here, we'll see this one is over here. It's called 100% stacked column, which is exactly what we want because everything adds up to 100. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. But if you look at our chart, that doesn't really look like what we expect it to look like. It's not really giving us the data as we expected it. And this is an issue with Excel. When your data is in a format that Excel recognizes and it does what you want it to do, it's great. But when it doesn't, you have to know how to edit it. So what can we do here? We might be able to rearrange our data a little bit to see how it comes up differently. But in this case, what we're going to do is right-click on the chart and go to Select Data. In this window here for Select Data Source, there's a number of things we can do. But all I'm going to do here is click Switch Row Column. And see, I switched our rows and columns, and I click OK. And now, when we look at it, we have a nice stacked bar chart. So you can now compare the different shares of income distribution from different categories. So now we've created 3 different charts using the exact same data. And so you need to decide when you're making a chart which one tells the story that you want to tell. Once you've settled on your data story and you know how you want to display it, then you could work on tweaking your chart so that the colors are how you like them, and changing chart titles and axes and things like that, which we will start doing now. Now that we have a chart that we like, let's work on editing the different components and getting it to look a little bit more how we'd like it to look for a final chart. So there's a number of chart elements that we need to consider and think about how we want them to appear. So some of these components are very simple to edit. So for example, the chart title. Simply double click on the chart title. It's a plain text box, so we can go ahead and put in whatever title we want. And then we could even select our text and change our font and font color, size, and things just like as you normally would with any kind of text editor. So then we want to look at some of the other items. We have our legend down here. Do we like the legend the way it's laid out? Do we like the colors? So in this case, since we're talking income dispersion, a very common way of showing this is red to green. So let's go ahead and change these colors. So I'm going to click on the blue bar. When I click on the blue section, you can see that both of these are selected. You can see by the dots around here. Over on the right hand side here, I have a Format Data Series window where I can change some settings here. If you don't see the Format Data Series window, you can right click on the item and choose Format Data Series from the menu bar. So I'm going to click on the paint bucket for fill, and you can see how it's set to automatic. But I'm going to change that in this case. Let's do solid fill, and let's change that. Let's use a green pattern, because that is the highest income level, so green seems to make sense. So let's select our lowest quintile now, choose solid fill, and let's change that one to red. And now we can just fill in between. So let's go to the next quintile, choose orange, go to the next one, choose yellow, and then the next one and do maybe a light green. So now you've got to consider what colors to use. If you're going to be printing this in black and white, you might not want to use solid colors at all. You might want to do the similar thing, select your areas, and then go to something like pattern fill and fill it with different types of patterns. And then that way, those will print better in black and white. And you could always change the color as well. In this case, I'm going to go back to solid fill and stick with the green. Another thing that we can do, obviously, is we can resize our chart however we want, but we can also resize our legend. So maybe we want to move our legend. In this case, it looks okay there, but we can always play with that. Sometimes just by simply resizing our text box, we'll change how the legend is displayed and let you move it around a little bit and see if where it fits best in your graph. Because the legend is simply a text box, I can also right-click on it, go to Format Legend. Under the Format Legend pane, if I wanted to say put a box, an outline around the legend, I can come over to my legend options, under the fill and border section, expand border, and I could just say make it a solid line, and I could change the color, and the font size to match whatever I want. So in this case, we'll just choose black. And then I go back to my chart. I have an outline. I want to resize it a little bit and move it around. In this case, it probably does look better to keep it down here. So I'll go ahead and move it. One of the other things that you're going to want to do with your chart is look at your axes labels and see how they show up and decide if that's what you want and how you want them to display. Depending on what you want to change depends on how you would go in. So for example, for our data series, we have two data series, 2015 and 1977. If I wanted to edit these, the easiest thing would be just to simply edit them in my original data. And so if I change this, for example, just add an abbreviation for year. You can see when I do that, it's going to change my chart to match my original data. So that's the easiest way to change those labels. If I right-click on my axis, I will get an option for Format Axis. Then I could see some of the axis options on the right. And you need to make sure that you look through all of these to find the ones you're looking for. There's different sections for fill, line, and effects, and there's other options under text fill. So under axis options, you might want to look at the settings in there to see how things are set up. Specifically, number is one that you're definitely going to want to look at. So it knows that these are percentages, so it makes that default for you. And then it's defaulting to 0 decimal places, which is probably fine for this case. But maybe we want it to go to 1 decimal place. That's fine. Just change that to 1, and now you can see our legend's going to show in 1 decimal place. In this case, 0 decimal places probably makes the most sense. When you're trying to edit components of a chart or a graph, sometimes the hardest part is just figuring out where those options are. The easiest way to find them is usually to simply right-click on the option on the section of the chart that you want to edit, and usually it'll be Format, in this case Format Data Series, or Format Axis, or Format Plot Area, for example. So that's the easiest way. But what if there's a section in here that's not in here that you want to add? So for example, let's delete my legend. So now I can't right-click on my legend to edit it because it's not there. So what do I do now? Look at the top on your ribbon bar and you'll see two buttons, two tabs, Design and Format. Under Design, over on the left, you'll see Add Chart Element. This is where you can add an element that's not already there or edit an existing one. So by going to Chart Tools, Design, Add Chart Element is where you could find a lot of the options that you might not find otherwise. The buttons are in slightly different places on the Mac, of course, but they're all there and they're very similar. So in this case, I'm going to scroll down to Legend and say I do want a legend and I want to put it at the bottom. And now I have the legend back just how I had it by default. So going back to one of the charts we created earlier, our simple bar chart comparing the 2 years, 1977 and 2015, we could do some of the same things on this chart. We can change our title. We can change our data series, the colors and how they're displayed. I can simply click on one of the blue bars and you can see it selects each one of the blue bars all at once. If I just click again on a blue bar now, you can see I only have one blue bar selected, not the others, and that would only change this one. So if you want to change all of the data series at once, you got to make sure that they're selected. I can come over to Solid Fill and I can change that color if I wanted to. So I could change it to any other color that I choose. But what are some other ways that we can chart this data? Well, again, let's select our data, go to Insert, and go to Charts. So we did the clustered columns and the stacked columns. But let's see if we wanted to do a line. So this isn't a great chart for this type of data because this data is not continuous. These are quintiles, which is discrete categories. So really a line chart isn't the most appropriate type of chart, but it is easy for Excel to create that for you. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. If you're not quite sure which chart might be the best for your data, one thing you can keep in mind, select your data and then go to recommended charts. And Excel will automatically give you a few charts and show you what they look like. So in this case, we have a couple of problems. So the clustered bar chart was a good example for this, comes out pretty good. And this is showing you a horizontal versus a vertical bar chart. But when we go into the stacked bar and the stacked columns, they're not showing up right. So the Excel is not interpreting the data properly. So we can make this chart, but we have to tweak the data a little bit before it's going to work. So you could look at recommended charts, but if you don't see what you're looking for, that doesn't mean it's not possible. It just might mean that you need to do a little bit more work to get there.